Welcome to Module 4, Activity 2. One of the best ways for us to be able to build relationships with our students is to first make sure that we have a good sense of self and a good self-esteem, that we have been able to build strong relationships within our lives. So here's a picture that you might have seen in other trainings or look familiar if you're traveling or flying. But the idea is that you always put on your oxygen mask first before you start to take care of others. And this is a good analogy as we are thinking about developing trauma-informed classrooms. As educators, it's one thing to make sure our students have modeled emotional regulation, but it's another thing for us to really practice that in our own lives. Especially if we are working with many students who have experienced trauma, we need to make sure that we are processing our own trauma before trying to put the, quote, oxygen mask on the students in our classrooms. So being solid in our modeling techniques, being solid in our emotional regulation, and working with our coworkers to work and see who has really great emotional regulation, who would be able to come in and talk with students, who is someone who you can rely on when you need to have a talk at the end of a hard day. So I want you to remember this picture as you're thinking about creating a trauma-informed classroom. You first have to make sure that you put on your metaphorical oxygen mask. Because our own trauma memories can prevent us from caring for the children entrusted to our care in a warm and responsive manner. If when you were a child, your parents went through a divorce that seemed to be very traumatic to you, and then you have a student come into your classroom talking about their parents' divorce, if you haven't processed, if you haven't been able to think about and have that emotional regulation of the trauma you experienced as a child, when that student comes and talks to you, you may start to re-experience your trauma and therefore have a response that may not be a safe and welcoming environment for that student who is trying to process a trauma they are experiencing. So make sure you're thinking about your own trauma memories and making sure that, again, we have put on our own oxygen masks before we put the oxygen masks on for our students. Because we have to build those strong relationships. When a behavior becomes an issue, the first question often is, how can I change that behavior? But really what we need to do is make sure that we have built that strong relationship with the child or with the student, and that we have also processed our own trauma, and that we have also created a classroom environment where everyone feels as if they are courageous, capable, cared for. So in a chaotic world, students need an anchor. I want you to reflect at the end of this video on how you are that anchor in the lives of your students, those experiencing trauma and those who have not.